Hey, it's Monday night. Welcome back to the Dialogue with Dozell. And we are dealing with all things pertaining to our existence in America. We redid the script a little bit for Black History Month this year. And actually, we're going to go over into March, because we're going to cover everything. We're going to be quite comprehensive in covering topics that concern us in a very contemporary way, not just a historical way, but a very contemporary way. I am so excited about our guest tonight. By now, you're used to Mr. Quillie Jones. He's like our senior statesman, and he always comes on the show and asks, and he puts down the facts from a historical point of view, but he has a way of bringing it into today's. He's with us by phone. Hey, we'll get Mr. Jones however he'll relate to us, and we're just so excited. Janis is going to be joining us shortly. And we have a very special guest tonight, a dear friend of mine. Juna Thompson is a Black entrepreneur, and she's going to speak about education and some of the other topics that we didn't get a chance to deal with the other night. So let's go with it. We're going to ask Juna. Mr. Jones, how you doing, sir?
I'm thankful and blessed.
Amen. Amen. He's going to always bless us with a word from God. Ms. Juna, how are you?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And since this is your first time, Madam Producer, not the last time, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and tell us what you do and just inform Dozell on the things that you do.
I do a lot. So currently, I'm the owner of Quality Standards Real Estate Services, where I manage agents as well as property managers. In addition, I work with Broward Partnership, work in housing the homeless. I work with my board, as you know, and I do inspections as well. I do HUD inspections. So I'm part of a company that nationally we're going out to Section 8 offices and conducting and bidding on contracts for inspection. So I do a lot.
Well, thanks, Juna. We kind of were a little bit last week, Mr. Jones. We were kind of all over the place when we talked about did we regress or progress as a result of integration? And I know you have a great historical context to share with. I still remember the marble fountains. I don't know, Juna, if you're old enough to remember the marble fountains, especially living in South Florida. But we grew up in Dozell, and we saw that stuff up there.
Wow.
But tonight we're going to kind of focus on some of the other trends to see if we gain or if we lost with integration. And I think one of the places to start is education. I am a product of the state's university system. I was there in Daytona, wanted to finish up at Cookman, but they were going to take my AA and it was going to be dissected because they were on a quarter system. And of course, state system I started on the semester system. So I had to go to UCF to finish up. But my heart is always with that school that Mary McLeod Bethune founded there in Daytona Beach. Mr. Jones, where'd you finish, sir?
Fort Valley State University, Fort Valley, Georgia.
Yes, sir. That's I don't know if you know my uncle Ben Varner was a football coach, All-American out of Florida State. Ben recently left us a couple months ago. He was, I think, 94. But yes, sir, Fort Valley State.
That's Fort Valley State University.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fort Valley State. Yes, sir. Juna, where'd you finish school?
Well, I went to Fort Lauderdale and got my AS. At the time I got my associates, I didn't even realize it was a difference between the Associate of Science and Associate of Arts. But they got extra money because of that. And then I went to finished up at Ashford University with my bachelor's in criminal justice with a minor in law and business management. So, And then I started my master's there as well. So I've been there for some time between getting different certifications.
Well, thank you very kindly. Madam Producer is she attended Tennessee State University, the majority of her college tenure. And I'm going to ask her to chime in because we're going to do some comparisons between did we lose with the integration by assimilating and giving us the opportunity to go to the state universities, which of course predominantly white, and take us here in Florida. We pretty much went to Edward Waters is university now there in Jacksonville. My dad is a graduate of there. Or we went to Florida A&M University. Our son played football there. Or we went to Florida Memorial, which is now Florida Memorial University down here in Miami. And Mr. Jones, I'm going to ask you. You saw both sides. We'll kick off with you. Did we lose? Did the HBCUs lose when we were able to go into the other schools, assimilated to the majority white universities? Or what's your take on that?
Allow me to do some reminiscing. We as a black people requested integration because of economics. White universities were getting money that we had no idea that was available. Until the Kennedy administration, we had a gentleman that became Secretary of Housing, which was Dr. Weaver. And when once he became Secretary of Housing, we found that there was money in education and in housing. So we had opportunity to branch out economically and financially by virtue of getting federal funds, and we found that by getting federal funds, we could expand the horizon. We did lose some black identity by integration, but that was expected because we had to sacrifice.
Okay.
There was funds available. We had no idea about it until we had blacks to get into the federal government. And doing so, we found out the different pots of money that was available. And of course, there was a sacrifice we had to make from elementary school to university. And that's bite of the apple that I think we would bite again if we had the opportunity to.
Juna, let me ask you, when you went to, since Mr. Jones introduced us the K through 12, which is a retired school teacher, how remiss would I be if I didn't bring that into? Did you go to an integrated school system, or was it after the Charlotte-Mecklenburg decision?
It was already I was born in 1964, so I think I came in right at the edge of things transitioning.
Okay.
When I started school, but I heard the stories and the pictures and of going through that transition. But by the time I got into, I want to even say elementary school, things were definitely at that point segregated.
Oh, okay. So they still were segregated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Mr. Jones, I know you can really relate. For me, as a product of Duval County Schools, I can absolutely tell you that facilities-wise, there was no comparison. There was no comparison. In fact, once they, after Charlotte-Mecklenburg, the decision, the Supreme Court decision against that school system, which forced integration on schools, what they did in Jacksonville, and I don't know in you guys' municipality, I think Mr. Jones, you were in Jacksonville at the time. They all of our neighborhood schools, our neighborhood high schools, we lost that total sense of identity. And in fact, at that time, Gilbert, where you took pride if you lived on the east side of going to Gilbert, if you lived on the west side, you took pride in going to Stanton. If you lived out west, you looked forward to going to Raines. Raines was a new school, so they couldn't close it. But what they did to us at Gilbert, they made our high school a 7th grade center, which was abysmal. I take that back. They made it 8th and 9th grade. seventh grade center was right across the street from where I was growing up at the boys' home, and they used an old private school that was old and decrepit, made that the seventh grade center. What are some of you all experiences in facilities wise and where we went to school, and the equipment you couldn't compare? When I got over to a white, quote unquote, white school, you couldn't even compare the facilities or the equipment at least. What were you guys' experiences?
Dr. Varner, allow me, if you will. When the 1954 decision came down, Brown versus Brown, there was a choice. The United States government gave school districts a choice to integrate by volunteering, or they would have to go to court and force them to integrate, to do the right thing, if you will. Because of disparity in the quality of education, and the quality of schools, and the quality of books. So many of us who were in the civil rights movement chose to go to school because the local board of education was just adamant enough and stubborn enough not to adhere to the volunteering of developing schools and curriculums to the point of quality and equity. So it wasn't an easy fight. It was a difficult fight. Many of the school boards in the United States just had to be forced by federal courts, virtue of federal judges, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which was headed by Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall at that time. He was over the NAACP Defense Fund. His assistant was a lady by the name of Constance Motley, and her assistant was a Jew boy named Jack Greenberg. So there was a lot of forcing, not volunteering. So it wasn't, they didn't do it by choice, they did it by force, court order, if you will. So that's what happened.
So you never got to attend the white schools, right? During your K through 12 experience?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Oh man, no, goodness no.
Yeah. Because I was in, I think around 71, I was going to seventh grade. In fact, I can remember, you knew my dad.
Yes.
They made us, they closed the Boylan Haven building there on Jesse Street down, and they were going to force us to a building right around the curve over there in Duval to, I think the school's name was Annie Beeman. And my dad said to me, he said, well, buddy, you're not going to leave one decrepit old school and go to another one. He said, so you find a school you want to go to. So me thinking I was going to be this up and coming running back football star, I ended up choosing Landon, which fed into Wilson High School that was going to all the state championships back then. And I went there. It was an older building, but it was more well maintained, and the equipment was not to be compared. How about your school experience, Juna?
Well, I mean, we went to preschool, but once I got up to be around, I would say fifth grade, it was definitely mixed. It was, it was well-rounded. And I think a lot of it had to do with the neighborhood that you lived in as well, because we lived in more of an upper income area. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And then my mom moved back to New York City, which New York is a lot different than the South. So I think my experiences was a lot different in New York, even though every summer she'd send us down to either North Carolina or, Virginia. But my experiences changed. So I didn't really see a lot of, I thought I was just as good as anybody else. As far as education wise, it was great. And my experience wasn't that of like my husband's or yours, Dozell, growing up with, I think my experiences was better.
Okay. So Mr. Jones went to HBCU. You and I went into the simulated school system. And I'm trying to get Madam Producer to step on and put those headsets on, because she was a modern day HBCU. So my wife and I had the unique experience in the, when was it? around 2000. Yeah, I think one of the girls came out in 91, 2000. Um, both of our girls chose to go to HBCUs. We were living near Chicago at the time, and I used to take Mr. Jones. I would take our kids down to Tennessee State's homecoming because it was the real closest HBCU of notoriety. You had Kennedy King College, which I think now Malcolm X College or whatever, but it wasn't to the level of the schools. And so the last 3 years we were there, we took our kids down there. Well, our oldest daughter, the producer here, Toya, chose to go to Tennessee State based on those trips that we went down there every year to the homecoming. Toya, you with us? Your headset's on?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Hey,
So
family.
Toya, you didn't have the benefit of going with me to all of the college tours that I ended up doing once we transitioned down here. But what advantages did you see by going to a HBCU as opposed to going to a simulated school, a state university?
Oh man, so my I guess my elementary experience was pretty white, if you will, pretty integrated, and so
You
that
never
was
let me
fine.
forget that, Juna.
Yeah, will not. And that was fine. But let me just tell you, going to um, going to school and seeing folks that look like you, having teachers, really nerdy Black people, people that are enjoying teaching you, nurturing you. There's just nothing like it. Just being in a classroom and just the topics that are discussed in a white environment. The focus on slavery. I mean, going to a HBCU, I got to learn about different, exciting, powerful Black people outside of people during slavery. I got to had teachers that were African. I mean, just it wasn't just a Black experience. It was all kind of different Black people, and it was nothing. One big thing that's really important in education, I think, is just being not nourished. What's the word? What is the word? Big. It starts with the N, but just that. Go say it again. Nurtured, just being nurtured. That is so important as you're being reared and you're in the academic situation. Being nurtured is so important. It's just I can't even express the experience if you didn't have it. Going to school just with white people, and they just don't. It's just the cultural, blockage, if you will. It's just you almost feel nothing, and then you go into an environment like I did for the first time. Going to a Black school, just you felt love. It felt like your auntie was teaching you, your uncle, and that was beautiful. And I'm very grateful for the experience.
Yeah, my son went to Bethune-Cookman, and I'm telling you, when I went to that school, I was so disappointed.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it, because I have
very disappointed in the upkeep. It was like it almost felt like they weren't getting any funds. I was expecting, a lot more. I was expecting a lot more. He went there, he managed, he got through it. But I mean, it was just not a well-kept school. I felt like this, had I known, I would not have wanted him to continue there.
What did you feel about the overall experience? Okay, so the building was not upkept. Well, the facilities weren't upkept. How did you feel about the overall?
They weren't. I don't think they were on focus. I know my son knew that we had high expectations, and I had to go up there a few times because it was a party school, and so it wasn't the warm feeling like she experienced. I mean, it was a lot of disconnection, and I don't know if it was just that particular school, but that was my view for a long time for HBCU, and it's because of that experience, it didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. And my granddaughter this is her second year. She got a full scholarship, educational scholarship for University of Florida. And she was kind of toying with the idea of going to HBCU. I said, you know what? You got a full scholarship. You just go where you got that full scholarship. Because after seeing that campus and after seeing my son and me having to pull the reins back and all the partying and all that stuff, I said, you don't need to go there. You need to go where you can be focused. And I guess it's good and bad. that wasn't going to be her school of choice, but it did put, a bad taste in my mouth.
Big,
Well,
let me just say, I think that's a totally fair assessment. And I think it's really about what do you need? It's you can't just say all black, you should go to HBCU. No, it's what you
Right.
need. I needed nurturing because I didn't get that in the environments I was in academically before. So it's about what you need. But I agree. The same here. The facilities were not great. We always complain, but the nurturing overshadowed that part for me.
and
Hey, allow me to inject something here.
go ahead, Mr. Jones. Hi,
Among
Linda.
the black institutions, physical compliance was not as of a quality that we would love to see them be. That was because of lack of funds. We did the best we could with what we had. The government had taken a position not to provide our institutions with money because of the attitude that the civil rights movement took. So we had to sue the government in order for the government to provide monies for our institutions. And if you notice, they sent out a memo stating that in order for you to get the money that you need, you have to integrate your staff. That meant academically and athletically. So in doing so, many of the black institutions integrated their staff and the athletic department. We did the best we could with what we had. And a lot of modern, if you will, young people have been introduced to better quality buildings, maybe not the commitment of teaching and developing, but building than they had been accustomed to. So we did the best we could with what we had. And
So,
the states were not really happy with the position that the civil rights movement was making. And we refused to compromise quality of life versus politics. We refused to do that. They found that we weren't going to do it, and we continued to go to school and continue to go to courts, if you will, sue the government and the Board of Education. And finally, we were able to recruit some of that money that was available for white institutions. Made the white institution more popular than we were because they had the alumni association,
right.
was providing money for those institutions.
Now, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I yield to you, sir.
No. Go ahead. I was just going to say I was just going to interject very quickly. You went to a state university, right? Fort Valley State is a state institution, right?
Yeah. Let me tell you the difference in that. In my area, they would love to have segregated schools. They would do anything they could to maintain segregation from a state level.
Okay.
So we didn't have as many problems as other institutions had when we began to fight quality. When we began to fight for equity and quality, then the tide changed and the tide turned. They called themselves beating on us to get in, and we chose not to. And we wanted you all to benefit better than we did. There were sacrifices we had to make. But that's what happened.
So that we got this dichotomy, and we really could almost do a whole show on this. We're heading to a break. That because the funds were not getting to the schools, and of course Bethune-Cookman, I don't know why he had to come down on my school journal, but of course that's where I was. I didn't finish that, like I said, I didn't finish it, but that's where my heart was. I showed for the president and everything. Bethune was actually a private school, so it didn't even equate into the state system. It did manage to get some small state funds. And if you all are aware of the controversy, I just want to keep us aware, Mr. Jones, valid point. The controversy a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, Ed Reed, former Baltimore Raven, Miami Hurricane football player, had taken a football coach position there, a la the popular trend of big college players going to these HBCUs, a la Dion. And he was just absolutely appalled that hurricane damage from the last hurricane that hit back in September. I was trying to skip back down here around all those hurricanes during that season. Had not even been repaired, and he was appalled that there was no athletic facilities, no gym. I mean, no showers for the players. They had to go to the rooms. But he went to the University of Miami, where Mr. Jones raises a very valid point that the alumni basis kind of pitch in and kick in. Now, Bethune-Cookman and FAMU were the two major schools in the state of Florida, so which means that they have strong alumni, but we don't put the money back like other schools do, and where there's a greater base. So I appreciate the point you're making, Mr. Jones.
Let me go back to the coach that was hired at Bethune and how they criticized Bethune. The assumption was that they were going to have the kind of school that Lord bless Deion Sanders to have at Jackson State. But see, I always say, you get what you put in is what you get out of it.
Okay.
Deion did a lot of politicking.
He did.
Deion did a lot of demanding and threatened to boycott economically. And as a result, he was able to get what he needed. Now, any coach who goes in a predominantly black school, because the best quality talent goes to the white school. You have to work to get your school at the level that you want it to be
Yeah.
You're not going to walk in an institution like we have, and it's going to be a quality institution like Jackson State, because Deion did a lot of work.
Right.
And the alumni came out and supported him. You see, we have some of the biggest stores that love Bethune. Winn-Dix is one of the major
right.
food entities that love Bethune. The boy didn't go down there and talk to the Davis people.
Right.
He could have gone to public. See, there's ways, you work for what you need, not for what you want. Nobody's going to walk up and give you anything, especially today, when you have a crazy, foolish governor that's talking against black folk. So you got to work, and you got to get people to help you. So, my problem with him is that I wouldn't want to see nothing he developed.
So
talk about a university like that.
So as we close out this segment on education, heading to break, I want to ask you one more time, Toya, to interject. I think there's a balance that we talked about. Juna talked about the facilities, and man, I saw that both hands that our girls were right behind each other. Toya came out one year and Kimberly the next year. Toya goes to Tennessee State, and you think you're at the University of Tennessee as far as the facilities, the outside of facilities, the upkeep of the grounds and all. We go to FAMU, and it looked like a hurricane was in progress there. And in fact, our daughter Kimberly ended up leaving after the first year and going down to UCF. And then Dozell is excited to go to FAMU and wouldn't take anything less. So I think, Toy, talk about the balance again before we hit the break, so we can kind of close this segment in and talk about the balance of the nurturing against the facilities and those kind of things and decisions that you would make if you had to do it all over.
Not a hurricane at FAM. That's not what you encountered.
It was horrible. It was horrific. She tried the year. She stayed there that year, and she just talked about when we went to UCF, she just talked about the differences, and it's embarrassing. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, just with anything, you have to weigh out the pros and cons of what you are deciding to do. And I went there already understanding that we don't have funds like the other public institutions. So I already understood. And so, yes, registration was crazy. I didn't know if I was going to make it through it because it was so unorganized. But I remember I went to school and I didn't have all the money I needed to go to school. I remember I went to the honors department, and I can't think her name at the time, but she just was, "Come here, baby." And she put me behind the desk and she gave me some work so I could make the money to pay for my books. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Just the love and dedication. She didn't, bring me down or put me down, but she did what she needed because she knew I needed her, and she was there for me. So I'm very grateful.
So I think just putting the cap in Jan, we got to let you weigh in. We just got like a minute before we go to break. We're talking about going to an HBCU as opposed to going to a state university, which I know you did also. If you could do it in 1 minute, we got to get out of here for this quick break.
Oh, hi, good evening, everyone.
You're
There's
welcome,
no,
Jan.
there's
Thank
no
you.
way that any historically Black college can compete with your state institutions or private institutions, first of all, just because of size. And then you have to look at the alumni giving. So I went to the University of Michigan, and there are over 643,000 alumni actively engaged throughout the US and in over 181 countries. And the Alumni Association says, they've got over 300,000 people actively engaged. And that translates into 1,459,000, over $1.5 million, just alumni giving. And that's not even giving to specific scholarships. That's just programming. So Black institutions, which I have worked for one, Howard University, that has primarily Black students matriculating who are not making as much as their white counterparts, even when they go into the similar fields. There's no way they can compete with a University of Michigan or a Michigan State or a Harvard or a Stanford that have enormous endowments and engaged alumni that have the money to contribute.
Oh, thanks so much, Jan. We're heading to break, and we're coming back, and we're going to talk specifically about housing inequities while we have a realtor on with us, and we're going to try to get the show so she can weigh in on everything that we got going on tonight.
Okay.
The coolest production company in virtual world, GoGigaCreations.com. Like I say, they make this boy look good. And if they can make this boy look good, you can make anybody, any production look good. That's GoGigaCreations.com. You got to get them to do your web billing, all of those things. You saw the celebrities they work with. Great job. Listen, tonight we're gonna do a segment that we introduced quite a while ago, and I don't want to have to do this too often. But tonight is a shame on you. Shame on you. Tonight, it's shame on you, the shield. You make my cousin Janet look like a prophetess. She's been getting on me about my horrific addiction to the NFL, of which I tried to make amends by saying a few weeks ago that I had boycotted the league during the year of the Colin Kaepernick protests and the fact that he had been blackballed from the league. Shame on the Shield for that 7 years ago. But now shame on the Shield for your hiring practices. That's what she's been getting on me about. Jan, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if I can overcome this addiction. Maybe having hands laid on me might help. But I'm gonna fight this battle from within. Shame on you, Shield. How in the world would you allow an outstanding talent to be moved, to make a lateral move from one team to another when he should have had an upward move as far back as 4 or 5 years ago? Shame on you, Shield. It is embarrassing. It is embarrassing to the league that you haven't put better practices in place. We are so grateful to the innovators, the Rooney Rules, who know how to handle their coaches anyway. They've had 3 coaches in the last 40 years. Can you believe that? 3 coaches. When there's a carousel in the NFL every year of coaches being fired and being hired. But you've maintained, and you currently had a Black coach there for the last 10 years. And guess what? He didn't let you down. He's never had a losing record. So the Rooney Rule was a rule put in place to say that anytime there's a coaching vacancy, there has to be a minority coach interview. But the NFL has made mockery of it. Jerry Jones, you've been a part of that at Dallas. You put it out there that if Bill Parcells had not been there, you were going to bring in Denny Green. Well, you've made like 4 hires since then. You brought in black candidates, but none have been hired. The greatest atrocity has just occurred, and it should be an absolute abysmal embarrassment to you, Shield. Shame on you. What you should do in one of your rich, lavish locations where you have your coaches, where you have your owners retreat, you need to come up with a better personnel plan to make sure that black coaches get a better shot. You have now, this year we had 6 head coaching vacancies. Only one was filled by an African American. And he was advised by folk like Stephen A. Smith, myself, and others not to go to the Houston Oilers, the Houston Texans, because you fired a man last year who you stripped of all the talent, and he did a reputable job, and you fired him after 1 year. The year before that, you fired another black man who you stripped of talent. You had Deshaun Jackson sitting on the bench, so he couldn't help. He couldn't help the team. He had a losing record, and you fired him. The only reason it's acceptable this time is that you gave this brother a 6-year contract, and he was an All-American for the Texans, and perhaps he'll get better treatment. But what about the other 5? Well, the Carolina Panthers, they did a house sale, a fire sale. They got rid of all of their talent, but you had an African-American coach who kept that team together and fell 1/2 short of taking that team to the playoffs. And you sent him packing. And you brought in a recycled white coach who was fired because he couldn't do anything with the team like the Indianapolis Colts in 3 years. Shame on you, Shield. Eric Bieniemy. He's the person in question. Eric Bieniemy, all he has done is presided over the highest rated offense over the last 5 years, led by Patrick Mahomes. He was one of the ones who helped to bring to the Kansas City organization the validity of how good Patrick Mahomes was. Yes, he didn't call all the plays as the offensive coordinator, but he did the daily work of the offensive coordinator, and he did call some plays. In fact, the head coach, Andy Reid, who will go down as a Hall of Fame offensive guru, decided this year to give him a higher profile so that teams could see he did, in fact, call plays. Now, in the meantime, 3 of Andy Reid's former players, former coaches, offensive coordinators, who were not, who did not call all of their plays. Peterson, there in Jacksonville, who turned that franchise around, is one of them. He won a title, a Super Bowl a few years ago with the Eagles. In fact, he followed Andy Reid as coach of the Eagles. He didn't call the plays. Eric Bieniemy has gone on 12 interviews in the NFL, and not one team picked him up. Shame on you, NFL. You should have stood up, Shield. You should have pointed to the fact that you got to make some kind of provisions to give this brother an opportunity. Shame on all of y'all. Every owner that bypassed him, who brought him in just to fulfill the requirements of the Rooney Rule, and shame on all of you who passed on him as an interview. I've heard the rap. You say he's not a good interview. Well, dog it, he showed one on the football field, didn't he? His memory recalls me. Last week, the Kansas City Chiefs just won their second NFL title in 4 years, their 3rd trip to the Super Bowl. And by the way, those 2 plays that they scored on, where the receiver went in motion and came back in and was wide open and caught walk-in touchdowns, they were designed by Eric Bieniemy. But he had to go to the Washington Commanders, a franchise in utter disarray, as an offensive coordinator, where he'll call 100% of the plays just to show how good he is. Because it's a 28th rated offense in the league, perhaps somebody will say, now give this brother a chance. NFL, the Shield, shame on you. All right, we're back in the dialogue. I fussed enough. We're moving now to the housing market, and
May I comment on the editorial?
Yes, sir.
when it comes to hiring, you have to make these white boys hire. You can't get them to adhere to you when you compromise, when you sow. All those new coaches are young white boys. Don't know they're behind from their head and have black coaches as their assistant. That's seasoned.
What would you and Jan, what would you recommend happen to force the NFL to do better in this market, in this area?
It's all about the Benjamins. It's all about money. And the only way that you can overturn anything in the United States is to cut to the chase, which is the money. And so Black Americans, it seems to me, should be so offended by all those statistics that you just cited about Black men who are the talent background of the NFL and the NBA for that matter. And we're starting to, take over hockey, baseball, anywhere we go, we have great talent. Is to, like I said, get off your addiction to it. Stop subscribing to those platforms such as ESPN. Stop purchasing your tickets, whether they be individual or annual subscriptions, and let it be known that you are not going to support this entity that does not support us. It's all about money. And if there are enough people to pull away, then that will start to send a message. Quite honestly, and I understand people want to make a living. I understand that people want to excel and be accepted into what is considered the pinnacle of athletics, your NFL, your NBA, etc. But I'm just trying to understand how Black men can go and show up somewhere that they can't even become a coach. Why would you want to work with that entity?
So let me, and after I say that you've been saying that to me the last couple of weeks, I heard you loud and clear last week. When 70% of the workforce, as you said, 73.7% are Black, are we hurting our own? And this is my contention. You mentioned the networks. Of all the networks, anybody who has a basic cable would be privy to NFL games. Only this year that they incorporate Amazon on Thursday night games. So that I think us boycotting that would not make a tremendous difference.
Yes, it would. You're talking to someone who was a lobbyist for the entire public broadcasting system. I represented over 350 stations. So if you want to break it down to the micro level, stating that that basic cable can get most of your professional athletic games, then shut it down. Stop subscribing to cable. So see, you can't get off of your addiction to these things.
You're asking a lot. I'm gonna be honest.
And let me say this. My mother was born in Birmingham, Alabama. She put her life on the line for you and Juana and me and all other Black people, being a freedom rider, having German shepherds sicked on her, being hosed down by powerful water hoses because of the lack of, and it wasn't about integration wanting to be with white people. It was about having equitable resources. That's what integration meant to that generation. And Mr. Jones can certainly weigh in on that. But when you say that's a hard thing to do, so are you telling me that if you have been mistreated during the 50s and 60s in terms of not being able to take a bus, because my grandmother wasn't able to get on a bus and had to stand up when a white man came on a bus in Birmingham. And so the bus boycott of a year in Montgomery, Alabama, that turned around the bus system, which was incredibly racist, turned around. People, they sacrificed a lot. They walked their shoe leather treads to the bare. People sacrifice. So you're telling me that Black Americans now can't sacrifice not watching cable? How about reading a book? We have an illiteracy rate here of, I know in the city of Detroit is very high and throughout other areas of the country. You don't tell me that to do the better good, you would not give up your cable and put money back into your pocket?
Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do. I would find other means. I'm not going to cut off my MSNBC, my CNN. I'm a news hawk. I'm not cutting all that off just to spite the NFL. I'm going to approach them other ways. I'm going to
What are those other
their
ways?
games
What are
outside.
those other ways?
Huh?
What are those other ways? What are those other ways?
I'm going to boycott their games outside. We're going to. They are very. If you know anything about the Shield, the image of the Shield, it is highly protected. Their uniform policy is almost as highly protected as the military's. They want no dark mark on that shield, not one. So they can't stand a black boycott. They can't stand that. Juna, were you speaking? Juna? Is Juna muted?
She's muted. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Toya.
I think I kind of agree with I agree with Janis on that one.
Because you're not a sports fan.
Well, I mean, I ran track and I understand it totally. But the thing is, if you want change or not. So I don't think one should complain about something if they're not willing to do what it takes to make a change. So if everyone cut off that cable just for one season, 1 year, we would see a big difference.
Toya, would you please read some of my guys in here, Mac and Bernard? Would you kind of read their comments about this subject? And this was just an editorial. Go
sure,
ahead.
brother. Thank you, Brother Bernard. Boycott too extreme to get more black coaches. He says it's too extreme.
Wow. Okay.
The only
Why
way
is
it would
that
be
too
too
extreme?
extreme is if
Why is
there
that
were
too
none
extreme?
available or able to do the job. But we know that's not true.
Oh no, that's
Mhm.
not at all. Well,
May I comment, please?
yeah. Let her read this one more comment. What's Max saying?
And Max letting us know that it's a highly protected antitrust.
Okay, so know this. Because of the mess of the ownership, and Mr. Jones, we're coming right to you. Because of the mess of the ownership there, thanks, Toy, because of the mess of the ownership situation, all kind of sexual harassment and all kind of craziness in Washington, the NFL has done just short of mandating that the owner, Daniel Snyder, who owns FedEx, sells that company. NBA has been very strong. They got Daniel Sterling to sell his franchise and send the Clippers now, which were now in Orlando and LA, and they just forced the owner of the Phoenix Suns to dump his franchise because of some things that he done out there, a combination of things. The NFL is, because it's an old white boy network, it's regulated by them, and it's a little bit less, they're a little bit less amped, but finally they put pressure on Daniel Snyder. Notice that Jay-Z, I understand, was looked like it put together a team that was going to buy that franchise. Guess what surfaced this weekend? Jeff Bezos has stepped in, and I'm sure he's going to highly outbid that team. So this is what we're facing. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
I agree with the young ladies, Pastor. If life is not worth living over, why sacrifice? We have to make dead presidents talk. Give up the cable, give up everything that's being shown by the NFL. And this totally those black players. And that's done the boycott.
See, I find that hard to do. I don't mind.
Wait now. No, if you're hungry, ain't nothing hard to do. If you're hungry.
But when you're asking guys to step away from, Deshaun Watson is making like $47 million a year.
Let me share with you. We made a commitment when we didn't have anything and had a chance to get something. The Lord took care of us, and now he's taking care of you all.
Asking me to give up my cable, I can do.
We can walk. We walked when we could have been riding.
So
We chose not to go in stores.
right.
We were hungry. We didn't have television and cut the radio off.
How realistic is it that we can ask these guys? This is part of my reason, because we dominate the league numerically. I don't want to do anything that foul them brothers up. So I'm asking you.
And
But this generation, how many of these guys?
We
How many?
don't know until we try.
How many guys in this generation would step away from $47 million a year?
Listen, they may not have to do that. The owner may leave $100 million on the table. You think you want to leave it on the table?
Let me ask this. There are, based on last year's roster numbers, 1,728 players in the NFL. That is less than the masses of Black people. I could care less about those 1,700 Black men who are playing in the NFL over Black boys who are going through school now who don't see any Black coaches. I mean, 1,700, the good have to suffer with the bad, and there are far more Black folks out here who are struggling, and you're telling me that various players wouldn't give up 47 million? I mean, what part of society are you advocating for?
47 million.
One contract versus the masses?
You don't know what's on the other side until you try. We didn't know we was gonna get this far, but the Lord bless us to sacrifice.
Right. And to your point, Dozell, that you would find it very difficult to get off of cable. Cable's only been around for what, 40 years? About 1980.
Cable dominates TV. You can't see TV. You can't keep up with a lot of stuff. The internet.
There are over 200 African-American owned newspapers. Let me say this. There are over 200 African-American owned community newspapers from around the United States. I have been a writer for the Michigan Chronicle and for all 200 of those Black papers that are struggling because they don't have the readership. So let's say, like Juana said, for a year, get off cable. Can't you read a newspaper and give that money to a Black newspaper? They're covering the same things that your larger papers, your Washington Post, your New York Times, your LA Times, your Tampa. Why are we so hesitant to support Black businesses?
It's not a matter of Black businesses. It's a matter of you're talking about major, and I'm taking the hit for this, but I'm talking about major lifestyle changes. So I'm not talking about entertainment, because my wife will tell you 90%. Yeah, 90% of my TV watching is MSNBC, CNN, easily 90%. So I'm a news hawk. You can't compare a newspaper, which has a 24-hour cycle or a weekly cycle, or mostly Black newspapers, over against being able to be made current in an instant. So I'm not really. I understand the point. Mr. Jones, I lived in, so I know about the sacrifice. I have no problem with the sacrifice.
So again, you are, Dozell, I'm very disappointed to hear that you are supporting MSNBC, CNN, all of these major networks. And have you ever looked at the amount of money that they don't spend in the Black community?
No, but what I do see is the number of Black faces that they have in front of the camera. That's why I gravitate to them.
But see that you're looking at window dressing on the set. I'm looking at the amount of money that they spend on advertising on Black products, on Black publicists, on Black people getting a piece of the pie. So you're looking at a handful of Black anchors. I'm looking at an industry that does not. And it's not just the communications industry. What do? I executive produce radio and television. I've been in that industry. And you're telling me that you would not sacrifice a modicum of your experience for the greater good of Black Americans?
It's very hard to get Black people, for some reason, I think more than other folks, to come together. So if we have to pick a cause and stand by it, it's very hard to get everyone on the same page. And through our struggle, it shouldn't be.
Now, let me interject this. Your father and mother and I sacrificed for you all.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If we sacrifice for you all, why can't you all sacrifice for the next generation?
Say it again.
Mr. Jones, I'm making a point. I'm doing it facetiously. You know, I gave up the league 6 years ago. I gave it up with and didn't miss a night's sleep. So I don't have a problem with it. I'm just speaking on behalf of others. Bernard is saying nobody's giving up their jobs and millions to get more black coaches. That's a reality.
Well, they don't have to give up their jobs. If the majority of our people just stop watching and stop subscribing, that will make its point.
From midget football to junior high to high school to college. That's what got them in the NFL. Black coaches. They haven't forgotten that. NFL, what the black coaches developed, and now they're using it. The black coaches are the best assistants they have. That's why they're assistants. They're in the development position. They're not in the decision position, but they're in the development position.
Mr. Jones, let me ask you this: we're right at our break, at our hitting point. I've contracted Jen. My agent got with her agent. We got her for the next few weeks. So, next week we are doing blacks in the criminal justice system. Juno, I'm gonna throw this invitation out to you, a great panelist, and that's why we're getting you out of here on time, because we got to talk about black in the housing market. Would you all come back on the first Monday in May, please? I mean, in March. Would y'all please come back on and let's pick up this discussion right here. We want to talk about the black housing market. We also want to talk about blacks in economics. We didn't really do that last week. So we're going to pick up right here. We're going to pick up talking about this protest. We're going to talk about blacks in the housing market. Did we lose out with integration? We have a realtor on here in Juna. And then we're going to come back and talk about blacks in economics. She's an entrepreneur, as all of you all are. So if I can tie y'all down, we're going to, Bernard and Mac and man, Linda, if y'all will come back, I want you to come back next week. We're going to talk about black. We're going to have Sabrina Fulton, Martin, what's the kid's name that was murdered? The first of these, the Zimmerman killed.
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin. I was in Orlando when that happened. We're going to have, we're hoping that she's coming on next week, but we're going to have a whole slew of parents who have lost their children to either black on black crime or blacks in the system, or they have been murdered by police officers. That's going to be next week. And we're going to pick this. This is going to be a part 3. This is too compelling and too interesting. Thank you, Juno, for agreeing to be back with us. Thank y'all for the night here. Listen, we're going to close out. Jan, thank you for popping on with us. We know you had a very important engagement. Thank you. You're just part of this show now. Mr. Jones, we're asking you, will you be available with us week after next?
I think so.
All right, sir. Well, we'll work the schedule or whatever we got to do. We got to have your wisdom, and we'll pick it up. We're going to pick up right here with this week after next. There'll be a lot of new developments on this hiring situation in the NFL. So I really want to push that. We'll be back.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Night, sis. Thank you a lot.
Bye-bye.
Listen, before the dialogue closes out tonight, we want to those 3 brave souls that lost their lives right there, Jan, Michigan State University. We meant to have done that at the beginning of the show, but Madam Producer, were you able to get that? Yes. I didn't know it was a young sister involved. America, at some point, the Republicans are going to do. They're calling them Redumblicans. They're going to at some point. They're going to stop bowing down to the NRA, and we're going to do something to stop all of the richest country in America, in the world, and we can't stop people from going on killing people like this. God bless each of their parents, each of their families, and just rest their sweet souls in peace. We'll see them together in the dawn. We just want to sign off. Jan, thank you and bless you. Dialogue with Dozell. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.